everyone, how are you today? My name is Natalie and this is Garden Air, and today I'm just going to be doing some different things with my houseplants. I really have to go over some orchid stuff and I might be repotting today, so I figured I'd run the video and see what we're going to do and do a little follow along with what I'm doing today. My dogs will be with me. If you don't know, I have a few corgis and they are always around and getting nosy and joining in whatever I do. So they'll be in the video, I'm sure, and we're going to just kind of go over some different things. I have a lot of watering to do today, which I'll spare you that, but we'll figure out what else needs to be done as I go through everything and go through the orchids and probably do some of the plants in the kitchen as well. And one of my dogs is bumping the camera right now. So yeah, this is what it's like when you're videoing with corgis. Okay, so I'm going through the first corner of the room and trying to see what all is going on. And look at this beautiful orchid in bloom right now. It's one of my favorite ones and just fabulous. My Sheila token has finished up, so I have to get this all trimmed up. And we're going to actually we might take a closer look at this one today. I did do a video on all about this orchid already. Another Phalenopsis up here, drooping some blooms. That one's been in bloom for quite some time. That might be a good one to actually pull out and discuss. And all these guys need to be watered. So we have orchids there, we have orchids here, this one here, the big one here needing a repot. We have orchids down there. We have orchids over here. So there's quite a bit to do. I have a lot of repotting to do on some of them. And we definitely are overdue for some watering, so let's get going. Okay, so I got the watering done and I think we are going to do some repotting. I have a couple of orchids that are just literally climbing out of their pots. This guy, when I got him, it really had absolutely no roots at all, and I really had to set it up into a lot of sphagnum moss so that it could grow some more, grow new roots and survive. And now that it has roots, I need to kind of change it around, and it's been in here for a couple of years, so it's definitely time to refresh this orchid here. And this is a Cattleya. I also have this orchid sitting here. She's a little one, and as you can see, she's looking very thirsty. This one just keeps withering up on me. The top couple of leaves are still fine. They're a little soft, but she's obviously not taking up enough water. So I need to unpot this, take a look at the roots, make sure the roots are okay, because there's different reasons why an orchid might be this thirsty. One, I'm not watering it enough. That's a possibility, and it might need water more often. The other possibility is that the roots inside are not in very good shape and they're unable to take up enough water to sustain the orchid very well. So we're going to take a look at this, see if the roots are okay, and if they are, then what I need to do is just put this orchid on a better watering schedule, because it seems to need water more often than my other ones. So this one needs a little bit of work, and we'll get it back up and looking good in no time. Okay, so I'm getting ready to repot, and I make all my own orchid mix, so I just grab all my different things out. I have orchid bark, which is usually a fir bark, sphagnum moss, which I put in a bowl here and hydrate it and start tearing it all apart. I have perlite, charcoal, and I have giant leca pebbles. You can use clay pebbles, leca, anything like that. Generally, it's about getting a balance of how much water you want your orchid to retain between waterings. So I have a multiple of different media so I can mix it according to what orchid I'm potting. Sphagnum moss obviously holds a ton of water, and you don't always need a ton of soppy sphagnum all around your orchid. Depending on your environment, If your environment is very dry, you're going to want more sphagnum moss, but if you're in a humid environment, you're going to want less. So things like the orchid bark and the perlite and the leca pebbles, those are all going to create air pockets between the sphagnum moss so that the orchid roots can also breathe and they're not being suffocated or smothered by a ton of heavy wet sphagnum. So we're balancing out how much wet thick dense material we have and how many air pockets we can provide with the other blend. That's what you're going for. And some orchids like more airflow and others like a little bit less. Most of my orchids tend to like to dry out quite a bit between watering. Phalenopsis like to stay a little bit more damp between watering, so they get heavier sphagnum, whereas things like my Cattleyas, they tend to like it more dry, so they get less sphagnum, unless I'm trying to promote new roots. That's the only time you'll see a lot of sphagnum in one of my Cattleyas, is when they don't have enough roots and they need a little extra moisture to retain while they're sprouting roots. So in taking an orchid out of its pot, we're going to this one's pretty easy. See, she doesn't have as many roots as she needs. So now I can see very quickly why she's not taking in an adequate amount of water, and that's because she just doesn't have enough roots. She has a couple, which is good. There's no rot in here, so that's good, but I'm going to clean up this next. She was basically just kind of sitting at the top of all this media and not really getting down into that pot. So this orchid, she's healthy, she's just not retaining enough water because her roots she just doesn't have enough of them. So I'm going to cut out any roots that are dead and let the strong roots grow more, get them into some fresh potting media. Actually, this isn't too old because it wasn't that long ago that I got this orchid and repotted her. So I'm going to just clean her up and get her going. Now the other thing I want to do is give it a tighter pot, especially since it didn't have a lot of roots. I'm going to give her a little bit of a tighter pot. I think this pot was just too big for it. So looking at these two, I'm going to swap them around with pots. So I'm going to wash this with soap and try to kill off any germs that might be inside of it before moving orchids around between pots. Okay, so this pot has been washed, and now I'm just going to remove this orchid. These stakes are not doing anything for it. So let's get this one. Now with Cattleyas, I have to be a lot more careful with repotting them. Cattleyas are very sensitive to being moved around and repotted. And one of the reasons this didn't have any roots in the first place is because they tend to drop their roots after a lot of stress. So you don't want to really mess with the roots more than you really have to. You want to be gentle with these guys. So I'm going to take its net out. If we do lose roots, it's really not the end of the world. As you can see, they grow them back just fine. This orchid was completely rootless when I got it. And I'm just going to gently remove the old sphagnum moss. It doesn't look too bad. I don't see a lot of it deteriorating, but I do see like algae growth in here. So I want some more airflow in here, which is to be expected because I gave it a heavier amount of sphagnum moss than I usually would for a Cattleya orchid. This orchid looks really good. She just has a tangled flip-flop up here of roots It seems like they kind of grew every which way when she started forming her new root base. And it's now kind of a jumbled up mess, and I can't tell what direction her new growth is coming, but there's a new growth here. So I can see this section is going to be growing this way. Okay, so from what I can gather is, because I had potted it with so much sphagnum and kept things moist around the bulk of the orchid base, it was able to grow a ton of roots in every direction with all the moist sphagnum. So I ended up with crisscrossing roots and roots coming all over in the top, some of them coming upwards instead of going downwards because they were just happy in all that sphagnum. So I'm going to try to guide all of the roots downward instead of upward, and I'm going to give them less sphagnum this time, hoping that it doesn't drop too many roots after all this meddling. So I see new growth here, and I'm going to watch where my new growth is coming from, and it looks like it's going in that direction. So I'm going to try to give it extra space in this area here where my new growth is. So as I pot it, I'm going to keep it more so that the open space, any open space, is going to allow the new growth to have room to develop. That's the idea. So I'm going to push all of this old media that it was in aside. And I'm going to fill the bottom with some damp sphagnum because I like to use it as a base. For one thing, it helps catch all the little loose stuff from falling out of the pot all the time. And it just kind of gives everything like an anchor. Then I grabbed a handful of both bark and leca. And what I'll do is grab a little bit of different things and mix it as I go. So I'll throw some perlite in there. I don't think I need a lot of that. That really helps to break up the sphagnum. So what you see me doing is just kind of layering this, layering that, mixing it up really good, making sure that all my moist sphagnum is broken up with the solid stuff. Okay, so I just did the same thing and kind of mixed stuff, blended it all together, but I stayed a little bit heavier on the sphagnum for the little orchid that didn't have enough roots. So I stayed a little heavier on the sphagnum up near the top where the rest of the roots are, so that it doesn't get too dry between waterings, because with no roots it can't take in enough water. So I need a little bit heavier sphagnum around the roots that it does have, so that the plant can stay hydrated and we can spark some new root growths all down here at the base of the plant. The main thing is I have to make sure I don't suffocate my crown. Keep airflow around the crown so that we don't have rot building up here at the base of the plant. So I need to make sure there's enough air pockets through here while the roots stay moist. And that is a difficult thing to balance when you only have a couple of roots and they're pretty close to the crown. So it's something you want to keep an eye on while the orchid is taking time to grow new roots. And I'm glad she's not trying to flower right now, because she can put energy towards roots right now and not a flower stem. If she was in flower right now or trying to bloom, I would probably cut that spike off and let her put energy towards roots right now. I'm also not going to hang her on my orchid wall right now. I'm going to keep her on a shelf where I can keep a better eye on her and water her probably a little bit more often, and just make sure those roots are going to be growing before she goes back on my orchid wall. Okay, so we're getting into the middle of this big orchid that I had, and you can see, I'm just wanted to show everybody how different they are from Phalenopsis. These guys grow from rhizomes, and they all just kind of like branch off, and they keep growing in different segments. So they're not a central stalk kind of orchid like Phalenopsis is. So we can actually get in here, and once we get things cleared out and some of these dead roots cleared out of our way, we can actually find some junctions where we can divide this orchid, and I'll end up putting it back into 2 pots. So I want to go through and I want to clean up more of this debris that's all down in here. That's a lot of roots. Get rid of any of these roots that are dead. I've had this orchid for a couple of years now, and I have not ever gotten into it to repot it. I've just kind of left it alone. So it's in whatever state it was in when the nursery had last repotted it. So I'm sure there's going to be some some dead roots in here and some dried up things that I have to clear out of the way. And I'm going to have to really get in and fuss with all this stuff where the growth has occurred the most and it's all kind of solid, and then I'll be able to see more of what I'm working with. Okay, so I got it all cleaned up and I divided it. So I have 2 big clumps now of this orchid, and it's still going to be massively huge. So I want to clean it up. I really had to divide it because like I had these structures just kind of like being pushed off. They're not in the most beautiful shape. Everything was kind of fighting each other for space. And I don't want my orchid to keep kind of growing off in these wonky directions. And then the orchid just becomes too difficult to move, too difficult to water. And it starts to get ugly and like very leggy. So we are now divided. The roots are all cleaned off. I'm going to continue and just look for dead roots that have to be cut off and finish cleaning this up. And then we're going to get it all set up in a 2 new pots. Okay, so a sudden change in everything because it is now 5:30 in the morning the next day. My family came home and I just couldn't get enough of a quiet environment to finish filming, so I will update you on what's going on. So I actually ended up with 3 pots for the big orchid. So I kept doing blends like I was showing you, and for Cattleya orchids I tend to stay heavier on the bark and a little less heavy on the sphagnum moss because Cattleyas do like a pretty dry environment around their roots. So just enough sphagnum to hold a little bit of moisture between waterings, but not a lot. So here's the 1 pot, there's another pot there, and my 3rd one there. So I actually got 3 out of that plant, and yeah, there was just so much going on in it that I had growth sprouting off everywhere and a lot of roots, so I was able to do 3 pots. So there's my orchid wall, and everybody is spiking right now because of the drop in temperature at night that we had during the fall. That sparks your blooming spikes. So now we're just waiting for everybody to want to start blooming. Some are ahead of others. We have blooms and spikes all around the room in different stages. This guy has a couple of spikes going, and there's another big spike there. And so things are pretty busy. These are all orchids on this tray. So everybody is doing pretty good. So just waiting for the phales to start blooming now and go from there. So we're going to end our potting video here, and I hope that you found some of this helpful, and thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.